Hey everyone, it's me, Marcus. Today I want to talk about photography in our local neighborhood, the places where we live, the places that we know in and out, or at least we think that we know them in and out. I conducted a little experiment where I was curious to see what changes in my photos when walking through the neighborhood multiple times and using exactly the same route. And in my case, there were days in between. The photos that you will see in this video are between Christmas of 2023 and sometime in January of 2024. So again, there is some time between these walks, and yes, it's winter in Zurich, and now we already have spring and the sun is shining. So yes, this video was a long time in the making. I never really got to finish it, but now here we go, and I'm ready to share my results. Also, what I want to mention is that this video is strictly talking about photographing places or locations. I'm not talking about people photography in streets. That might be a completely different experiment where other things probably come into play, like maybe speed is of the essence. But here I'm really strictly talking about photographing or documenting places and locations. Also, when looking through the photos and preparing for this video, I was thinking this is not strictly, let's say, limited to photographing your local neighborhood. In the end, you will see that this probably is analogous to photographing any location that you are planning to go to. And maybe the lessons learned from this video are generally applicable. But let's see. So maybe some of the things that you hear today are obvious to you, and maybe some things are new. Either way, I'm curious to hear more from you in the comment section below after you watched this video. For this experiment, I tried to keep most parameters as consistent as possible. So I defined a strict route that I was following every day. I shot at around the same daytime, and I always used my trusty Leica M-D with a 28mm lens in this case, because I was really interested to see what changes in my perception of the neighborhood and not being distracted by variability in gear, daytime, and so on and so forth, to really focus on what catches my attention with the same gear walking the same route multiple times. So let's dive into it, and let's start with day 1 and walk number 1. Welcome to my neighborhood. Just getting warmed up. Getting an overview of the surroundings. Paying attention to the houses, the architecture, and how the houses relate to each other. Experiencing the space in between them. Consciously noticing color. And things that I encounter on my walk. Trying to see things and documenting what I see. Noticeable landmarks need to be captured as well. And here we have cliché shots of reflections. And now a series of photos of things in a neighborhood as they change. The post being rebuilt soon. A pizza robot where a car garage used to be. The backside of a large shop that closed. The main square in the neighborhood. And more things that surprised me on the first walk. Alright, this was walk number 1, and now let's take a look at walk number 2 and what changed. While warming up, I still tried to capture the surroundings, but I immediately discarded this idea. I wanted to avoid repeating the same shots from the first walk. So I tried to see new things that I missed, and while doing so, being more creative with the composition. I noticed this fence. Details started to matter more. After the first shot, I immediately knew that I could do more with it. And another fence. Starting to see how I try to go closer, or finding smaller things that I didn't notice on my first walk. The same buildings I was walking past the first time became more interesting. I noticed architectural details. Suddenly the church wasn't so interesting anymore, and turning around revealed new subjects. Once I saw a new subject that caught my attention, I tried to get more out of it. Again, an example of turning around and finding a new subject. I still couldn't resist taking a picture of the church, but I shot it from a different perspective that I didn't notice on my first walk. Back to the main plaza, and this time taking a few steps back to get a new angle and playing with the reflections in the shopping windows of the store that closed. Interesting. So let's take a look at day number 3. Welcome back to my neighborhood, this time with snow. I didn't feel to photograph the houses anymore. Details became more important. Away from the overview shots to odd things along the way. Being distracted by the little truck that removes snow, I saw a corner I never paid attention to in the 5 years I lived here. Walking past the house I was taking a photo of on my first walk. Not interesting anymore. And even a scooter was still there, but I lost interest in it. Again, an example of turning around to see different things. I also found new architectural details that I didn't notice before. Back to where the church is, I noticed the horse trailer, which was there since the very first walk, but this time I tried to incorporate it more into the shots. Closer by the church, I noticed benches and footsteps in the snow. Stores that I never went to suddenly caught my attention. They are also subject to change, thinking of the future. Here I noticed the cable from a construction and combining elements. Alright, that was walk number 3. Now let's talk a little bit about the results. So definitely what we can say is that these shots are by far no masterpieces, right? But there are a couple of subtle things that I noticed that I think are worth sharing. The shots from day 1 I would characterize as some kind of like overview or, I don't know, maybe documentation of the area. Somehow trying to perceive things in a very active way because I knew I was on this experiment. So I wasn't just casually walking, but I was like constantly holding the camera and hunting for the next thing. But looking at the results now, what we can say is that they were really purely documenting what I just spontaneously saw. Now, walk number 2 was definitely for me the hardest one, because somehow I knew what I was taking pictures of when walking for the very first time. And I knew I didn't want to like repeat the same shots, because that was not the point, or at least I was hoping to see different things. So this is when somehow this pressure came to be a little bit more creative with the environment that we've seen in the shots, trying out things, but maybe trying too hard, because now I was suddenly forcing myself to be creative, to not I don't know, repeat the shots, as I mentioned. But it was still a very interesting learning for me, because by forcefully trying to be a little bit more creative, I suddenly saw things that I never saw before. Walk number 3 started by me remembering the struggles I had on walk number 2, and how I was maybe too forcefully creative, or trying to be creative, and maybe to be creative in a more natural way. But what I realized now looking at the shots was that somehow consciously or subconsciously, what happened on walk 3 was that I was starting to combine more of these overview elements that I had on walk number 1, and maybe details that I overemphasized in walk number 2, and trying to somehow combine them in a natural way. And I think that for me somehow was one of the biggest learnings from walk number 3. Now, obviously, the results would change if I would use different gear, if I would take the photos on different times of the day. But I wonder, though, if the essence of these 3 walks and what I wanted to find out actually would change. Because basically what I wanted to try in this experiment is what changes in my perception if I walk the same route and visit the same locations multiple times. And again, I want to emphasize that the learnings, looking now at the photos and what I have learned myself from this experiment, is that obviously I started with the idea of photographing the neighborhood, and maybe I had this idea of making a video showing how photography in your neighborhood can be fun. But in the end, I think I learned a lot about going to places to photograph locations, and what happens if you visit the same location multiple times. The learnings from this experiment for me are that some of the shots would have definitely benefited from me taking them at a different time of the day, but by me taking the shot when I took it and then looking at it afterwards, I could then learn, from the shadows and so on and so forth, when maybe a better time would have been to photograph that specific locations. And then also I realized how things that were interesting and excited me in the previous walk were suddenly not so interesting anymore, right? So when we go to a new location, we're overwhelmed. We see all these things and we are focused on like things that immediately catch our attention, but those might not be the most interesting things in that particular location. And somehow going hand in hand with this, it went from, in the first walk, photographing in a documentary style, going from an overview to being more and more focused, to go from big picture to detail. And also going hand in hand with this, what we can say is that it goes from overview of what is there to maybe in walk number 3, what is the place about? What are the things about? Especially if you put them in context to each other. And then also what we discussed and what I mentioned is, sometimes when we're focused on one thing and we really get pleasure in taking pictures of those things, maybe just turning around, like see what is behind you, what is, to the left and right of you, because maybe you will see new things that, if you're just razor sharp focused on something, you might not see. So, just turning around might reveal new interesting things in a specific location. And then obviously I realized how photography in the local neighborhood is and can be fun. So I highly encourage you to also try it out, not just when you visit new places in maybe other cities, but try maybe something like this in your local neighborhood, because it is fun. And Last but not least, I think I know my neighborhood a little bit better because, again, I've never paid attention to the things that I paid attention in all the years that I've lived here. So again, maybe go out and try the same thing in your local neighborhood. To sum it up and maybe bring it all together, I think this experience has taught me that merely traversing and snapping photos in new locations like new cities and new countries don't guarantee capturing the most interesting sights. True observation and photography require more than a fleeting visit and a quick photo. Now, I'm not saying that it is impossible to take an aesthetically or technically great shot when visiting a location for the very first time, but I think if you want to make the best out of a location, we have to work ourselves into that location. And I believe it's worth it. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm eager to hear what your experiences are, what other recommendations you have. I'm always eager to learn from you and looking forward to a good discussion. As always, thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one. Bye bye.